collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
On this week's programme, we hear how an independent candidate for next year's presidential elections hopes to buck the voting trends in Cyprus.
The biggest political party is abstention. It's about 30% of the population that has not voted. And in fact, there was also 15% of the population in the latest parliamentary elections which have voted but did not actually get represented in the House of Representatives. So there's 45% of the population that is really not in the system. Now that's a huge pool. That's nearly half of the population. And I think that pool needs to be energized, interested, and be convinced to take a position by voting.
And a report from the Auditor General's office has slammed developments in Akamas and the role of the Ministry of Agriculture, Natural Resources and the Environment.
We're very much afraid that a lot of disruption has already occurred, and they keep inching towards the Baths of Aphrodite, as the area is called.
We have presidential elections coming up next year in Cyprus, and there's a new kid on the block. Well, I hope he doesn't mind me calling him that. He is a friend of our programme. He is Achilleas Dimitriadis, a prominent Nicosia lawyer, and he's been doing consultations around the island since last autumn, but he declared his candidacy for the presidency last week. He joins us now. Achilleas, thanks very much for giving us your time. What I wanted to know from you is what you're proposing, because there are several pillars, I think, after your consultations with the voting public.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Rosie, for giving me the chance, and thanks for calling me the new kid on the block. I actually like this. It's quite a nice, a very descriptive way of putting it. The idea was that there was a plan of action which we put in place from autumn, and that was that we would first do a consultation, then we would do an outline of our position, and then we would do a government program. So the idea was that the consultation finished. I had about 70 meetings with people. We had 5 public consultations. We started off in Limassol, then went to Larnaca, then Paphos, then the free area of Famagusta, and then Nicosia. So we had about 800 or 900 people coming, asking questions, and really having an exercise whereby I tried to understand a little bit more what are the needs of people and what are people looking for. And then I gave the announcement on Monday, the 28th, saying that I am now running as an independent. And as you rightly pointed out, there were 3 pillars. The first one's called Honest State, and that has to do with transparency. The second is Cyprus 2035, which is my outlook for the future. And the third one is in relation to the Cyprus problem. The view is that it pays to solve the Cyprus problem. So let me start with the first one. It's the honest state. It's a notion that I've sort of developed trying to point out that we really need to clean up our act in this country. Transparency must be increased, corruption must be exposed, notions of conflict of interest must be dealt with, justice must be administered quickly. I mean, justice delayed is justice denied, or as one former president of the US said, justice delayed is democracy denied. And I think we've reached that point where the system is so slow, our democracy is challenged.
How are you going to speed it up, Achilleas?
Well, the administration of justice is a huge issue. There's reform in the pipeline, but one of the biggest problems is delay. I mean, you have about 6 to 7 years for first instance, and then you have 5 to 6 years on appeal. Irrespective of the changes that will be made, there will still be a delay in the system. And my approach is the need for a task force that will be put in place whereby the backlog of cases, and when I say backlog, I mean anything filed before January 22, all these cases must be dealt with quickly, and the new time frame within which justice will be administered must start immediately. So if you file a case in 2023, it should be dealt quickly. I mean, if you take Ireland, for example, the commercial court awards a judgment within 6 months of filing. That's their average. So I would like to aim for quick administration of justice, and for the backlog, the Cyprus government must invest the funds and the manpower to deal with these matters. People must be called in. There are systems well known in other countries. One in the European Court, it's called the referendar system, which is the legal assistant who help judges prepare their cases and help them through the file so that they have the facts before them, the paperwork is clear, and they just take a decision after a hearing. So we really need to minimize the time that judges spend in a file, in administrative matters, and actually get them to do their job, because we have good judges. It's just that the system has stalled, and it has actually crashed on the burden of all the cases that are pending.
Okay, so you get justice coming a little bit faster. What else are you aiming for?
Well, we need to clean up the place. I mean, we need to have issues of conflict of interest sorted out. We need to clarify that the government system works for the benefit of citizens and not simply just another mechanism which doesn't move. We need to look at the digital transformation of the country, because we're way behind, and the government must be proactive in its assistance to the public. We need people helping citizens understand how all these new services can be given from the government, because it is their job to do it, and they must help citizens. So that's more or less the notion of it. You can look at it at achilleas.eu. I'm afraid it's still only in Greek, but we're trying to translate into English, so I would say in a week or so we will have that in English as well, and people can look at this notion of honest state that we need to put in place in order to clean up our country and give it some sort of prospect.
You talk about conflict of interest. It always occurs to me that in a place the size of Cyprus, that's a really tricky problem, because everybody knows everybody else.
Yes, absolutely. It is a problem, but conflict of interest, if you are a lawyer, is something you understand, or at least you should understand. I mean, if the President of the Republic goes on air and says, oh, the office that bears my name only made 62 applications for passports, which my Council of Ministers approved, and there is no issue of conflict of interest, that is a serious problem, and that cannot go on. We need leaders that will lead by example. We need to know what the meetings of the president are every week, and that should be open for the people to know. We need code of conduct. We need to have a check as to how people make money and make a statement once a year, so that we understand whether politicians are making money because of their position or they're making money from other sources, which is absolutely fine. So there are issues that can be dealt with. So I call that cleaning up the country. And then we need to give some prospect to the country. And that's why I'm looking at Cyprus of 2035. That's the 75th anniversary of the Republic. And I want people to think or imagine what they would like our country to be. How do they want to go forward? What sort of green environmental policies we need to have. I'm looking at one Cyprus which has to be green. We need to look at Cyprus as one ecological unit, so that if the air on one side of the green line is polluted, that obviously affects the other side of the green line. The same with water and the same with the soil. We need to have plans in place so that if there is a fire, for example, near the green line is going to cross, we need to be able to have a plan of action that would cater for these emergencies, let alone renewable energy. I mean, it's a scandal how the Electricity Authority of Cyprus, the biggest polluting factory on the island, is operating surcharge that the EU imposes because we are burning fuel oil rather than natural gas or solar power. So these are things that we really have to do. The green transformation is in place. We have to follow the European example. And of course, we need to talk about policy and social responsibility and the way the country will supervise how there is a development plan which will assist everybody and not just a few like we had with the passports and that sort of line.
So that's the environment, but looking ahead to the future, I know one of the things you're very concerned about is the stalemate in negotiations to solve the Cyprus problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's my third pillar, which has to do with the Cyprus problem, and I need to change the mindset. My view is that it pays to solve the Cyprus problem. My approach is that the peace dividend from solving the problem will contribute to stability, will give security, will allow development, which in the end will give prosperity for our little island. And that's how I want to see it. We need to seriously sit down and catch up with how far behind we are with efforts to solve the Cyprus problem. And the first point is that we need to regain our credibility both in Brussels and in the United Nations. I think our credibility is a disaster. Nobody takes us really seriously, and we need to follow the EU as to what it's doing, and we need to be under its protection, under its umbrella, because it is our best bet in trying to solve the Cyprus problem within the European Union.
That's a really tough ask when you've got heading the other side somebody who's already dismissed the Guterres framework and the idea of a federation.
Oh yeah, but that's just a bargaining position. It's the typical way that the Turkish side is bargaining. Let us get our act together. Let us put in place a plan of action to regain credibility in Brussels, to deal with the positive agenda of the European Union with Turkey. Let us look at the technical committees for the customs union. Let us deal with the immigration issue where Turkey is enjoying a huge economic boost. Let's look at visa, which Turkey wants. And within that framework of a positive agenda, I hope that we will be able to build and gain enough political capital which will allow us to solve the Cyprus problem. We really need to look at this as being part of the solution and us not being part of the problem. Within reason, of course, and granted the two-state solution is a non-starter, but that should not mean that we do nothing because the other side has this maximalistic position. My view is that we should prepare. We need a bizonal, bicommunal federation on the basis of the UN resolutions which are there, and we need to get back the Guterres framework. There are 6 points, and that's where we want to continue the negotiation. And it is in Europe's interest to have one Cyprus, because not only would that mean that we will get our country back, but it also creates a good precedent that will allow other countries in Europe to follow the same course. And so my view is that we should not simply use the Turkish position as a pretext for doing nothing. My view is that we should prepare for negotiations, and the Turkish position on two states will inevitably have to change because it is unacceptable in Europe and in international law.
The other thing, of course, is that if you come to some solution, you have to persuade citizens on both sides of the divide that this is the way to go. And that's another problem we've had over all these years of negotiations. Not only have most citizens not been properly informed about what a solution entails, but there is, I think you'll admit, a hard core of people who actually don't think it would suit them. And I'm talking about particular financial interests and so on, and they see a solution as undermining their prosperity.
Oh, people are entitled to their own view, and they are entitled to vote yes or no for a referendum, which will happen on both sides of the Green Line. The job of the president is to finish the negotiations and bring to the people a plan for solving the Cyprus problem, which he considers to be appropriate, and it is then for the people to decide. And obviously there are people against the solution, but my understanding is that the majority of Cypriots still want a federation to be the basis of the solution of the Cyprus problem, and we need to work on that basis. I have that understanding in my mind very clearly, and the job of the president will be to do whatever he can to bring back some sort of solution along those lines, and it is for the people to decide whether they want it or not. And I think one mistake that has been done, and you have rightly pointed it out, is that the people are not part of the process. And I think women were not part of the process either. And I have a lot of respect for women power and women's ability to solve problems sensibly. And I think more women should be involved in the process, primarily because they're half of the population, so they are entitled to that. But as a matter of fact, they have not been part of the process, and I think it would serve the purpose better if women were involved more in this process, because at the end of the day, it's our country, and we all should do something about it.
Now, let's talk about the election itself, because here in Cyprus, traditionally, people vote for party lines, and you're standing as an independent. Now, independent candidates, I think with one exception, but he did get party backing, have really not done very well in the elections. Does that mean that you're going to have to, if you like, court some of the political parties in order to achieve that ambition of getting into the presidential chair? Because if you don't, the chances are you've wasted a year and a half of your life talking to people and drawing up all these lovely plans, but people won't vote because they still vote like they did 40 years ago according to family party lines.
Yeah, well, obviously an independent cannot do it on his own, and I'm hoping that I will be able to attract interest from enough people to read my program and to vote for me, irrespective of the political party they are supporting. That's the notion of independent. And there is a methodology to this. That's why I have created the outline of my position, because I want people to view what I have written. Obviously, there is room for improvement, and there is room for agreement. And if more people agree to that, then the stronger it becomes. Now, there is also something interesting which people seem to ignore. The biggest political party is abstention. It's about 30% of the population that has not voted. And in fact, there was also 15% of the population in the latest parliamentary elections which have voted but did not actually get represented in the House of Representatives. So there's 45% of the population that is really not in the system. Now, that's a huge pool. That's nearly half of the population. And I think that pool needs to be energized, interested, and be convinced to take a position by voting. And I think that's a pool of vote that one has to deal with. But clearly, your point that people are traditional and sometimes vote for what their parents or grandparents voted is a fact. But I think people are growing, people are understanding more, people are becoming interested, and I am hopeful that an independent candidacy, which had nothing to do with the system up to now, will be a breath of fresh air, I guess, to try something different in the hope that we will live in a better country in the years to come.
So no horse trading with political parties if you get through to the second round?
No, there's no horse trading. There is our position. I mean, I've written about 40 pages of position. That's where I stand. And if people like that, then they support it. If people don't like that, we discuss what's wrong with it. And if that is something that can be made better fine. If not, then they don't agree with this, and they don't agree with it, and that's where it is.
So, finally, you're getting ready to, I think, publish your manifesto, we could call it, in the autumn, is that right?
Well, yeah, the next step is to prepare a government plan or a manifesto, which will be on a per-ministry basis. What you have now is on the three pillars, which is more or less how I view things for the future, what I see as being important, and how I propose to get there. A government plan will be more specific, will be on the basis of what a government should be doing, and most importantly, it will have to get some costing, because I can promise you I'll bring you sea to Nicosia, but that's neither useful nor cost effective. So we really need to be mindful of these things costing money and what sort of budget we will be running. So that's the next plan around October. We will get it. We have some teams of experts getting together and developing further the outline that we have created, because a lot of people worked for this, and I'd like to thank them publicly for their assistance and contribution. And this will have to be developed and put in place in relation to ministries so that it is manageable from a government point of view.
That is Achilleas Dimitriadis, independent candidate for next year's presidential election. You can find details of his proposals on his website, which is achilleas.eu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie, and I think Cyprus deserves better.
This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The Auditor General's office came out earlier this week with a report on the Akamas peninsula and the Agriculture Ministry. It was a scathing report. Well, to tell us exactly what it said and where we should be addressing these issues from the Green Party, we welcome Effie Xanthel. Effie, thank you very much for joining me. He just said that there were arbitrary interventions, illegal construction in Natura 2000 sites, and so many other problems I actually lost count. Now, you and I have talked many times, and I think generally we all know that the very precious Akamas Peninsula is being encroached left, right and centre. But what difference will a report from the Auditor General on these infringements make?
Well, that's the thing, really, because the Auditor General comes about it from another direction, and he basically says that by not applying the current legislation, you're basically losing money, or you're basically giving profit or wealth to people that are not allowed to have that profit or wealth according to our legislation. So suddenly it's not just about the local muhtar or the local mayor and, getting their own way. It's about the government itself. It's about the property that belongs to all of us being infringed upon. Now, the Auditor General has come out with his report for the Ministry of Agriculture for the years 2019 to 2020. So there's a lot of information in that report. Now, I understand that today we want to focus on the Akamas Peninsula, but let me just say that if anybody's really interested in reading a list of scandals, they should just go to this report directly. I mean, one thing after the other, you just read through it and you're flabbergasted. You're aghast at what you're reading. And we're still talking about, basically a year and a half ago. And it's getting even worse day by day. So, Akamas. We have the situation where the beaches are being infringed upon. He's mentioning Neochorko and Asprokremos, and also the area of Argaga. For those that remember, Argaga is close to Polis Chrysochous, close to the golf course that the Shakolos group were constructing. And it's basically a smaller piece of land that is protected as Natura 2000 because of the sea laying turtles in the area. And basically he's repeating the fact that the local muhtar has been infringing upon that beach and trying to create it into a swimmer's plaza, basically. So we've been dealing with that for 3 or 4 years now, more intensely, because the local muhtar basically believes that the environmentalists are, figuratively speaking, planting eggs on his beach and that's why he's not allowed to bring income to the community. And there's a lot of comings and goings. We actually had threats towards activists and people that were dealing with the program for the protection of the sea turtles. And things got a bit heated. They even went to the police. Both parties went to the police with accusations. And as far as I know, it's still an ongoing process. Every summer, basically, we have the same situation happening. And we have the interference of politicians from Nicosia trying to cool things down, because we have a very highly established politician that comes from that area, and he's trying to protect his and his own. As far as the Asprokromos beach is concerned, we actually have a revelation that there is an ongoing situation where government land is being sought out to be transferred for use from obviously some sort of local business or maybe an international business. We don't know, but that's a new information that has come out from the report from yesterday, and we're going to be looking into it. We're not sure what the government land is going to be used for. We know that there are various projects in the area. There's a theme park. The owners, or let me say the representatives of the investors here in Cyprus, are very eager to convince us they will not be infringing on any of the local environment aspects, and that they will try to safeguard every single tree or replant the trees that they will have to uproot in case of their construction processes. There is a camping site where small bungalows are already erected, and again, it's supposed to be an alternative refuge for people that want to go camping instead of renting a hotel or something. And again, they're also very eager in trying to convince the local community and the environmentalists that they want to safeguard the environment and so on and so forth. But there are so many developments happening in the specific area of Neochorko that we're very much afraid that a lot of disruption has already occurred, and they keep inching towards the Baths of Aphrodite, as the area is called. And that's basically where we're talking about core virgin nature, where we still can visit and see Cyprus as it was 100 years ago.
Effie, let me interrupt you here. There are two issues that I sort of think about when I hear all of this. One is that, of course, there are several very vociferous villages in the Akamas Peninsula who keep saying that it's not fair that because this is an area of special scientific interest or parts of it are Natura 2000, they are not allowed to develop. That's one thing. But the other thing is the changes that have been made in some areas to the town planning zones. How much are those two issues connected? Well,
it's very interesting, actually, because the areas that are being identified in the report are not the areas where we have the Mokhtars that are saying the things that you just mentioned. Neochorko has been developing quite rapidly the last 15 years, and Argaga is on the other side of Polis and not really connected with Akamas. Now, as far as the villages in Akamas are concerned, we have had a new development, basically with the legislation that has to do with the transition of the local governance. And there is a new municipality to be created by May 2024, and it's going to be called the Akamas municipality. Now, this municipality will include Peia, Inya, Pano and Gato Arodes, and Kisonerga, and I'm forgetting two more villages. But these are all areas that are connected directly with Akamas and with Peia geographically, and they're on the western side of the island. So there's going to be a geographically homogeneous area that is going to be this Akamas municipality, and we have these village representatives being very much against the idea of having this unified municipality being created. Now, the reason for this is because if Peia is included, it means that a lot of the areas that are already developed within the Peia area will be considered as a portion of the whole, which means that we will be able to safeguard the Natura 2000 areas, and we will be able to safeguard the beaches of these villages. But at the same time, we are also ensuring that there is income coming to these villages as well from the Peia wealth. So basically, we're ensuring that there's enough money to go around, that infrastructure is going to be upgraded, that we're going to have work for everybody, and that we will basically have the basis to be able to create the ecotourism that we were talking about, where you have the usual tourist amenities on the one area, and then the rest of the area will be able to offer the ecotourism and live off the wealth that the whole area is creating.
We're going to have to stop it there because we're out of time, Effie, but it does sound to me as if there are once again vested interests who are thinking perhaps their dreams are not going to come true, but from what you've just said, it could be that in the end this practice of salami slicing development so that they don't seem to impact on the whole area is going to finally be brought to an end.
Well, hopefully, yes.
Effie Xanthal from the Green Party, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.